You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Good Question Podcast. My guest today is Stephen Engler. He's a professor of religious studies in the Department of Humanities at Mount Royal. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of, unusual topics. The esoteric tradition of mesmerism, as in mesmerizing people, and the self-help movement that, began in the 18th century. I didn't know that. And then we're going to talk about other areas of his work that if I describe them, I'll probably completely butcher them. So I'll let him do it. But welcome, Professor Engler. Welcome, Stephen. Thank you.
Thanks much. Good to be here.
Yeah. Well, if you would tell me about your work, what does it encompass? It seems like a lot of unusual, religiously tied aspects, but how would you describe it?
I do field work with spirit incorporation religions in Brazil. So Kardecist Spiritism and Umbanda, and some field work with Afro-Brazilian religions and Neo-Pentecostal traditions. And what I'm interested in is the fact that people have similar sorts of experiences in different religious traditions, but very different ideas about what's going on.
So what happens in these religions? I know like Pentecostal religion, they'll get the Holy Spirit into them, and people sometimes will shake or speak in tongues or, fall down and roll around and things like that. And then just through TV and all that, I don't know, I would imagine in Brazil, it's kind of the same thing. They get infused with a spirit and they would dance or sing or maybe speak in a certain language. Like what happens when these processes happen?
Part of that is the same in many traditions, that people will, from the outside, have a different personality, a different voice, a different body posture. And so that's very similar. And yet when you ask people what's going on, they'll give you very different stories that reflect the different beliefs of the traditions. So I think one of the first things we need to do is establish, as a religious studies person, I never ask the question of whether a certain person's religious belief is true or false or better or worse. I'm just trying to understand where they're coming from. Because where I start from is the idea that when people believe something, it makes a difference. Now, you don't have to even get into the question of, is it true, is it not? If it makes a difference in people's lives, that is worth studying on its own. And in a way, that's what we're talking about. We're starting with mesmerism and on how does believing make a difference?
I mean, if you haven't had the experience yet, let's say you're new to the religion, either you grew up in it and you've seen it, or you're curious about it, or again, you've seen it as an adult, and you're going and you're going to have hopefully your first experience. I mean, I don't know, I would think you'd have far less belief than someone that has had the experience. So that if people first do it.
Well, it depends on how far you want to go. You can go to many different religions and just be there, and you're not going to have that sort of experience. Some people never do. And anthropologists, people like Tanya Luhrmann, has studied how whether you're looking at, say, witchcraft, a community, or whether you're looking at Protestants who learn to talk to God, or the French scholar Alloy, who looked at how you learn to incorporate the deities, the gods, in an Afro-Brazilian religion. And various people show the same thing. You use kind of the same techniques you see in the self-help movement, in neuro-linguistic programming. You are working with affirmations. You're trying to reinterpret the world, and you're training your body by sort of imitating other people, and you get in the zone. Often it takes 10 months, a year, and after a while you just start seeing it from that other point of view. But it's something people learn, and we can study how it's learned. So it doesn't necessarily have to be supernatural at all, but your first encounter with some of the religions I visit is going to be pretty odd. It looks very different. When you talk to people, they see it as a totally positive, healing, spiritually developing experience.
Well, what have you literally seen? I mean, I'm sure you hung around and seen a lot of these things in person. What's an experience that they really impacted you?
I interviewed a woman who had gone to psychiatrists, psychologists, and it didn't help her deal with what she felt was just increasing anxiety. And she'd start to get upset at the people in her life, and she started to feel out of control. But she went to a Neo-Pentecostal church in Brazil, and though she wasn't one of the people up on stage, which is very dramatic, where up to 20,000 demons are, according to the pastors, expelled from a person with great force. But she, dealing with another pastor on the sidelines, would have what she was told was a demon pushed out of her body by the power of Jesus. And she would feel great for a couple of months. And then she'd go back again. And that was her regular psychotherapy, having demons expelled. And I've talked to other people who go to a psychologist with about the same timeline and the same schedule. Anxiety increase, go there, check in. That's what fascinates me is if you stop asking what really exists, do these things really exist? What's the truth? And you start just asking, what difference does it make in people's lives? You start to see more similarities than differences.
What difference does it make to the lady? It allowed you to live normally for months at a time, but what are the common reasons people do it?
Grow spiritually. And sometimes I talk to several people who, when they were young, they saw people, dead people, or heard voices, and they come from a culture that accepts that. So someone I talked to, he used to play hooky and get on his motorbike and just skip school. He and his friend were heading out, but his bike didn't work, so he stayed home to work on his bike, and his friend got in an accident and died. And that evening, in his kitchen at home, his friend appeared to him right there. He said it was undeniable. It wasn't a ghostly person. It was his friend standing there looking just as real as he'd stood there many times before. And then the friend disappeared. So that worried him. He went to talk to someone. In that society, it's not hard to find someone who totally believes in spirits, works with spirits. And that person said to him, "Oh, that's no surprise. Your friend was, shocked, violent deaths, confused people, but then he's getting on with his afterlife. Don't worry about him. Let's talk about you. You're seeing dead people." And he learned to work with what he sees as a very positive ability. And now he's a medium in a religion called Umbanda. And once a week, different types of spirits on different days come down, and he helps people. He's one of the people now who's helping others. Maybe a person has a sore elbow. Maybe a person's losing their keys all the time. Maybe the person's just had a bad relationship. Talking to these spirits and being blessed is part of how they get through difficult moments in their lives.
So, why do you study them? Is it just like an anthropologist point of view? You wanted to see how this works and what it means to the culture? Like, why do you do what you do?
I'm always asking questions. In a way, I feel like I'm religiously tone deaf. I respect every religion I've countered. I mean, some of them have dark sides or rough edges, but it doesn't touch me. So maybe it's a personal quest. I'm often told that. I'm told you're here for a reason. You were brought here, and I'm open to that. Part of it, though, is just what you said. I went to Brazil when I was an exchange student and met people there, and then years later went back and ended up getting married to one of the people I knew there. So that's a reason to keep going to Brazil. And it's just fascinating to see another culture where belief in spirit and spiritual evolution over many lifetimes is on the television. It's in the music. It's down the street. It's around the corner. It's drums keeping you awake at night from the Umbanda center next door. And it's just part of life.
Of all the religions that you've seen, are any of the encounters negative, or are they always positive for the people that engage in them?
Well, some people, it depends on the religion. In Neo-Pentecostalism, people see themselves as attacked by demonic forces, and then they're protected from that. The religions I tend to go to more, the spirits are totally positive. But sometimes there are negative spirits who hinder you, sort of get in your way. So I've been not exorcised, but disobsessed a couple of times in rituals. Though honestly, I can't say that I couldn't see what the problem was before or what the solution was after. But it was interesting to go through the process.
Oh, okay, so they would say like you need to, I see, be treated. They would treat you, but before and after you kind of felt the same.
Yeah, like I said, I sometimes I think I study religion because I respect people who get it more than I do. I can tell you a lot about religions in terms of their historical context, their ritual variation, their demographic characteristics, but I don't really feel it.
Have you ever had a spiritual experience like this, like they talk about?
Not like those, no. But on the other hand, isn't every day, if you're paying attention, filled with spiritual experiences, a chance encounter with a generous person, or the ability to help someone out, or a coincidence that throws luck in your way, or bad luck luck that you just narrowly missed. I try to remain open to that sense of wonder everywhere. And maybe that's why I enjoy these religions, because they're just so varied. You're in a room with people who see another world behind this world, and they found a way to open that door, and you can sort of catch glimpses through it. It's a privileged job to have, to go and visit people in their spiritual spaces.
I mean, with all the things that you've seen, you must have seen a lot. Do you believe that there is a spirit world, that there is more than just the material world that we see?
I don't know, maybe it's ironic, or maybe it's just a different variety of open-mindedness. But the more I study religions, the more I think that question just doesn't get us anywhere. To ask what's real, I don't think there's any payoff to that question. Even when you ask, like, what's the meaning of things, I think the meaning is in what you end up with, not whether you find what really exists. I get more and more pragmatic in a sense. I mean, you mentioned mesmerism. That's a good example. We look at mesmerism, we see something starting there. And if we trace it into the future, if you start asking what's going on, well, then Mesmer was wrong because he had this theory, and Cardicism has a different theory, and the self-help movement has a different theory, and Freudian psychology has a different theory. So if you focus on the theory, people's idea of what are the real factors involved, you see this landscape of very different things. But if you focus on the practical side, what real difference does it make in a person's life? Or even more, let's say we focus on techniques of focusing your attention, working different expectations. So in a sense, an affirmation that you try to shape reality, suggestion, auto-suggestion, suggestion to others, creating a narrative, trying to tell your story in a way that makes it fit within a certain viewpoint. You're changing your beliefs, and you try to model your behavior, getting your body involved, so you are imitating the other way other people work. Those techniques, we could say, if we stop talking about theory, that's the heart of the self-help movement, at least many types of it. That's the heart of psychoanalysis. That's the heart of hypnotherapy. It's the heart of neuro-linguistic programming. It's the heart of Cardicism, of mesmerism, of the New Age movement. It's the heart of many types of magic. It's the heart of theosophy, many UFO religions. So when you look at that practical side and the techniques that are used, and set aside the theory, what we see is that the modern world has taken an interesting turn. I think that's the most interesting aspect of it. This stuff really didn't happen before. I think you nailed the date, the late 1700s.
But again, all the experiences you've seen, I was going to ask you to tell me about some of them. I mean, I've spoken to people that have observed people when they've had a near-death experience, and they told them things that they couldn't have known, supposedly. Haven't you seen things that you had no explanation for, yet you saw them or experienced them?
Me personally, not really, no. Like I say, I bring the Ouija board into my classroom on esotericism when we're doing our session on spiritualism. Nothing's ever happened. I tell my students, maybe I'm just like a lightning rod. I just ground all the energy. But I've talked to lots of people who have experienced things, who see things.
Yeah, maybe, like I said, you're the spiritual equivalent of typhoid Mary. You don't get sick.
Could be.
You can hang around it.
Well, one thing I don't say it's that I'm dismissive, right? And I am open, but maybe because of the way I look at things, because I don't even ask the questions of what exists. I just don't get into the way of looking at things that does produce those results. But let me give you a couple examples of what other people I've talked to have experienced.
Yeah.
So there, I talked to a woman who had a dream of lizard extraterrestrials coming into her house, and one came in a room and touched her foot, and then she woke up, and then she went out, and there were several lizard extraterrestrials in the house, and then one of the entities protected her because the others were threatened. So she took that to a friend from a different religion, but the one that also believes in spirits, and said, I don't know what to make of it. So her friend went and they talked to the advanced spirits of Cardicism, who are people just like us, but through many lifetimes they're more advanced with each than we are. So they come back to help us by talking through mediums. So I mean, it's like a self-help tradition. Everyone's just trying to grow and become a better person. by talking to spirits who can help them do that. And the spirit said, yes. What happened was you had some negative energy from a murder that took place just across the street from you. And that energy was in your house because the person who was killed had a relationship with one of the people who worked in that place. And so you were protected because you are a spiritually developed person yourself. So what do you make of it? It doesn't really fit within that person's religion. It doesn't fit within the religion of the other person she's talked about. Those kinds of entities just aren't part of that tradition. So what do you make of that? I mean, what I saw was that here's a person who was totally comfortable with this experience, saw it as a positive, protective experience that moved her forward. That's beautiful.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's some of the, I don't know, the craziest stuff you've seen?
I've had people see me and offer reflections on me that felt powerful. So I was talking to an Eshu, who's a very powerful spirit from West Africa, appears in goes different ways in different Afro-Brazilian or Afro-Cuban or Afro-Puerto Rican traditions. And this Eshu is like all Eshus, very powerful, can be dark, can be dangerous, can be a protector. They're sort of beyond morality. Good and evil don't really apply. It's a place people go for black magic. If you want someone to fall in love with you when they're not returning your attentions, you can pay for a sacrifice there. If you have a business partner you want to get ahead of, you can pay for a ritual there. So I was talking to the Eshu, and I was, most people have problems they talk about. I don't usually have problems to talk about, so I start more or less interviewing the spirits, which most of them are cool with. And the Eshu looked at me and said, he thought my questions were trivial. He said, you're throwing these words around trying to label what's going on here. And he said, you're just starting out spiritually. Look down beneath your feet and you'll see an encruzilhada, a crossroads, a place of religious path. So he turned it around, but the way he did it, the energy, because I was talking not to a person, but to a very powerful spirit in the person. At least that's what everyone in that building believed. And the way he said it to me really hit me. And if I were less of a sort of ethnographic person in the field, I think I would have started going back to that place for rituals myself. But I think my ethnographic stance keeps me, at a certain distance, which maybe is not a good thing spiritually, but it's certainly a good thing academically.
But again, have you seen anything just, I don't know, people levitating, people speaking in, as if they're possessed? Have you ever been around where, like exorcisms or anything? Or
well, yeah, exorcisms like the ones I mentioned in the New Pentecostal Church. Every tradition is different, but usually that's one of the things I do is read the rituals like a text. And as an outsider, how do you know when someone has the spirit? There's always going to be signs. A hand behind the back, the voice changes, the posture changes. They work with might have different clothing, a certain sort of spirit's going to be bent over with a little cane. Then you know what type of spirit is. Another one's going to light a pipe. Then it's a different type of spirit. They speak with different accents, with different vocabulary. So there's lots of signs that you're dealing. Some of the mediums I interviewed the people, and then I go and see them in the rituals, and I'm talking to the spirit in them. And it's like this person. Some of them I know socially. I go and have a beer with these people, but in the ritual, they don't see me, and I don't really see them. I see someone else there. That's a very interesting and even unsettling experience at first, but after a while, you simply say, well, that's the way it is.
What do you mean you don't see them there?
When you're talking to someone, there's an energy. You look in their eyes, they look in your eyes, you see them, they say you, it's the same thing. But when I'm talking to a medium I know personally, when they're incorporating a spirit, their body language is different, their voice is different, the eye contact is different, like they don't really see me, like I've never met them before. Their attitude is different. They're a very generous, powerful person, somewhat condescendingly, but also very charitably reaching out to help me. They're not someone I'm having a beer with. Part of it's the ritual situation, the clothing, maybe they're playing a role. I don't think it even helps to ask that, because I'm playing a role there as an ethnographer, but I don't recognize, some of these people are people I'd call friends, and in the ritual, I don't see my friend.
Well, what do they say they don't see you? What do they see when they look at you?
Depends on the religion. In say, Candomblé, Afro-Brazilian religion, normal is the medium will not remember what went down when the Orixás incorporated them. In Umbanda, the normal is to remember, but remember that you were not in control. So if I talk to the person afterwards, they'll say, yeah, I saw you there, but I was just watching. I wasn't talking to you. That was the spirit talk. And in Kardasism, people remain totally in control. So different religions have different trance states. Interesting, I asked someone once, do the people you work with in Umbanda ever fake the incorporation? So do you have mediums who are faking it? And he said, yeah. And he said, I know there's one guy who can't remember, and he lies about it and says he does remember. Well, that was the opposite of the answer I expected. He was saying that someone didn't have the right sort of trance because they went too deeply into trance, which isn't the typical trance for that particular religion. So there's all these ideas of what's normal religious experience, but they're very similar in terms of the effects they have on people's lives.
Well, have you ever had the spirits, I don't know, say stuff to you and you're like, that unsettled you? Like you couldn't, how did they know that? Or they, I don't know, said crazy shit to you that just shocked you?
No, like I said, I talk to so many people who have amazing experiences, but I don't have the experience. One of the interesting things is, you know how the ritual's supposed to go. It's got a script. And as an ethnographer, I, subtly and respectfully will respond off script to see what happens with the ritual. It's a sort of ethnographic experiment. And I remember once I was in a ritual and they said, no, you stand aside. This was during a time when there were elections in both the US and Brazil coming up. And then they took me up to the second most important person in the house, and so the second most important spirit in the body of that person. They said it was because they wanted me to be able to understand, because the accents can make it different. I mean, I speak Portuguese well enough that I don't have trouble. But there I was. And he said, what, the deeper voice, son, what's bothering you, son? And I said, well, I'm kind of worried about the election. And then the spirit said, not only the American. And that shook me. Like I was thinking, wait, spirits shouldn't be knowing what's going on in current events, or do they know? And so for a moment, I was sort of thrown outside the script and I didn't know, am I talking to the medium? Am I talking to the spirit? What's going on here? And then the script reasserted itself. And then there was the blessing, you touch forearms, and everything was back normal. So there's all these cues going on about what is normal in a certain ritual. And that's one of the interesting things, is to see when something off script happens.
Have you ever asked the people around you, like, hey man, how come I never get the good stuff? Have you ever asked for more?
Well, I'm always open for it. Then in Umbanda, they give a triage ceremony. So I go back every year. If I haven't been there for a few months, then I go through the triage again. And that's to see whether I have any immediate problems, because they offer, it's almost like a little hospital, a spiritual hospital. I've never had serious problems that needed to be cured. Whether I need to come back with lesser problems, I've never been told that. And sometimes I'm told, you really just aren't a very developed person spiritually. You need to work on that. I'm happy to agree with that. But sometimes they say that I have great spiritual talent. It just needs to be developed. And I talk to people about what to do with that. But the answer to that question is, you have to join a community and walk the path and spend the time. And I don't do that kind of immersive ethnography. I do more comparative, going to different places. I suspect if I committed and went every week and did the study and did the work, I'd end up having those experiences.
Oh, what if you did a sabbatical? You for 6 months or whatever, your year, you hung out with the one that you liked best and try to go deeper.
Well, I was on a sabbatical recently, and I went there deciding I was going to do that. But then I decided not to do that for two reasons. First, because it wouldn't be authentic. I feel like it's more respectful to turn up honestly and say, I'm curious, I want to learn, than to do it as an experiment. It wouldn't have been a natural desire to come out of my own feeling I needed to move forward spiritually. It would have been an observation. And that felt a little too invasive. And the other reason is the nature of the work I do is more comparative. And I think what I'm trying to do in my studies is learn about a bunch of different traditions, precisely from this perspective we've been talking about. I'm interested in what they had in common.
Oh yeah, I think where you established that, I guess, for a long time. I guess if this was a movie, you would have you'd be the character that, well, you wouldn't, but you'd be the character that would say, I want to go deeper and learn more, and they would would warn you and they would tell you, well, you have to do this and that. And then you would do it. And all of a sudden you get sucked in and realize it's real. Or, there was a movie that's, I'm guessing would happen, but, it hasn't gone that way. But has anyone ever told you that? Like, you can go deeper, you can really, find out the real truth of it, that you have to do X, Y, Z that you weren't willing to do, or there was never even an invitation like that?
Well, there have been invitations, of course, and but more to the point, I already know what the invitations look like and what the paths look like, because I talk to people at various steps along those paths. So I'm not sure I'd feel. Pierre Verger was an amazingly important, somewhat problematic in some of his judgments, a very important French anthropologist in Brazil. And he took it deep. He became a master, acknowledged in the tradition, but he didn't have that intense incorporation experience. And he said, well, I went to school and grew up in France. It's just a different mindset. So I might find that in Brazil. I'm not even comfortable with the degree of, giving people kisses on the cheeks that Brazilians just take for granted as a Canadian. So I kind of suspect that's the second big reason I don't think I'd get that far, because of my personality, my upbringing.
So well then, it's weird. At the same point, what drives you then to want to learn so much about all these traditions and compare them? Like, where, I don't know, I'm not trying to psychoanalyze you. I hope it doesn't seem like that, but you're free. But why do you get into it so much, but yet you don't, like, you go half in, it sounds like, or 3/4 in, but not all the way in. And
let's reframe it. I don't think that's the right way of looking at it. I'm not interested in going into the religion and seeing what those people feel. What I'm interested is looking around at people who believe in science, people who believe in what they hear on television, people who believe in stories that just circulate and they accept those things as true. That's what I'm interested in, is the more general idea that people have theories and ideas that they lay over a basic human experience. And I'm trying to understand why people tell themselves certain sorts of stories and believe them so deeply. And they think they're so true when from the outside they don't. So in other words, I don't see a lot of difference between someone who isn't a scientist, a practicing scientist, but believes that science is the truth. Why do they believe that? They don't have any evidence. That seems to me just like someone who believes in a wacky conspiracy theory, or someone who believes in a not so wacky conspiracy theory. It seems to me that's a lot like people who believe in religion, because in all cases, again, once you set aside the idea, is this the truth? Is that truth? Set aside people's theories and look at the underlying experience. We all, to some extent, are born into a reality around us, and we all, to some extent, start layering on our own viewpoints about what's really going on. And I see religion as just the most interesting place to look at that bridge between experiences that we all share, trying to make sense of the world, trying to change our place in the world, to grow, to develop spiritually, and the very bizarre ideas that get layered on that from many different directions, whether you're talking hypnosis, which comes straight out of esotericism, or passe, which is the manipulation of fluids, or Reiki, or working with your chakras. If you look at the experiences under all those things, they're very similar. But the ideas float off in all these different directions. So again, when I'm not interested in having a religious experience. I'm interested in understanding how people have a knowledge experience that believes certain things. What kind of evidence do people use? And the more I study it, the more I realize we're nowhere near as rational as we think. So we can learn a lot about how scientists operate by studying how people in spirit and corporation traditions operate.
I mean, there must be tons and tons and tons of spiritual traditions. How come you keep going back to the same ones, or do you go back to the same ones to find out more and then you add new ones?
That's a good question. I go there because it is deeply fascinating. Kardasism is a religion that impresses me because its idea that we reincarnate over and over. And in Latin America, they especially emphasize the idea that you often reincarnate with a similar group of people, different role, and that there are love stories in Brazilian literature and television that take place over many incarnations. And so I've met people, I'm related by marriage to some people who are more comfortable with the idea of death than anyone I have ever met in my life. And they're comfortable with it because the ideas of that religion see it as so natural and so positive. Every death is a step forward on our path back to God, another reincarnation. That's how that religion sees it. So Cardicism, we just really respect, and the emphasis on charity, and so many hospitals and orphanages and hospices are supported and paid for by people who belong to that religion because they see that as part of their spiritual development. And Umbanda, a similar sort of thing. It's a religion that's just so positive. It's like therapeutic in a different way for different groups of people. And on the surface of it, the Pentecostals across the street think it's demons working in that building. Fair enough. I just look and say, these are a bunch of people who are using ideas that most people in the world would think are very odd to make their lives better, to make the lives of people around them better. And I think that's a really useful place to look at this general question of how do we construct our reality using ideas that are all over the map.
Right. Excellent. Well, very good, Steve. What's the best place for people to learn more about your work? Do you have books on it, or they're like summaries, summations? Where can they start?
I published a little book on the idea of tradition recently, but you can just Google me. There's a bunch of articles available, or drop me a line in an email.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast and talking about all this, and I'll keep having really cool experiences, and I hope you have experience one day that like knocks your socks off. See?
Oh, every day I have experiences that knock my socks off. Perhaps the socks are loose, but once you realize that there's 1,000 different perspectives that bring meaning to people's lives, you can't go through your day, no matter what kind of day it is, without realizing that we're making magic every day just through the frames we start applying to the world around us. But thanks very much for having me.
Excellent.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.